Ah, okay, cool.
Clamped on.
Whoa.
And just when you think that interrogation by Judge Williams was going to end, it didn't. It kept going.
Goodson's defense attorneys essentially blamed Freddie Gray
okay,
for his
so
own
what
injury.
I'm going to
Said
be
he
doing is
created
making
the
a
risk to
chibi
his
Zeus
life
instead
by
of this
standing
large
up
one.
in the van instead of staying on the floor where officers had
How
placed
am I
him.
going to do that?
He also said there was no physical sign of Gray's neck and spinal injury, no way for officers to know he was in distress. Tessa Hill
Look around
the
this
local
size.
NAACP says she's disappointed prosecutors didn't show more evidence of a rough ride, but she's still convinced there was one.
It was a rough ride because I talk to people every day in the street who's had a rough ride. So a rough ride could constitute just going one block or half a block and them shaking the van.
Arthur Johnson was among a small group of protesters outside the courthouse calling for justice for Freddie Gray. He was struck by what the court did not hear. Defendant Goodson did not take the stand.
Now, I'm from the old school, the Perry Mason school. And there's only one reason you don't want to testify, and that means that you might incriminate yourself. If you did everything you were supposed to do, where could the incrimination come in?
This is the third trial in the case with no conviction so far. If Goodson's not convicted, legal analysts say prosecutors will be hard-pressed to convict any of the remaining officers slated for trial over the summer and fall. Judge Williams says he'll issue a verdict Thursday. Jennifer Ludden, NPR News, Baltimore.
Whoa.
The death of Freddie Gray still has a lot of people thinking about their relationship to the police. We're going to hear now from Jared Marcel. He's a 27-year-old New Yorker, and for him that relationship is complicated. His story comes to us from WNYC's Radio Rookies.
Tuck your shirt in and wear your pants on your waist. Try to frown less and smile more. Be respectful. I heard those things a million times from my parents.
There was just raising kids properly. There was a way I wanted my boys to be raised, black or not.
My mom was also trying to protect us. By the time I was 15, I had grown bigger and looked a lot older than I was. Cops didn't see the good black boy my mom raised because 6'3", 290-pound black guys who aren't playing football are always up to no good. I had to deal with harassment, name-calling, and on several occasions, use of unjustified force. One time when I was 18, a cop punched me in the face. What are your thoughts on the interactions between me and the police?
I'm very saddened, definitely angry at how you've been treated.
You know, people have no idea, like, how that could affect you. When, you know, I've had so many run-ins with the cops, Mom, that it didn't just affect my relationship with the cops, it affected how I viewed society, maybe how I even treated, white people, you know what I'm saying? I don't hate anybody, but I began to resent them in the sense that I felt like the cops were targeting me because they were trying to protect them. The thought that you're a problem can really change you. It's even affected my confidence. Walking down the street, wondering if people see me as a suspect. The cops are public servants, so if they're profiling me, the public must be afraid of me. Just last summer, I was hanging out with my boys outside my house.
But you gotta see, and we like chilling, hanging out in front of, your crib, like.
That's Tyrone. Suddenly, an unmarked car pulled up and rolled down its windows. I knew what time it was. I waved at the passengers. "What's up, officers? How's everything going?" But that wasn't what they wanted to hear, so they hopped out on us.
Asking if we have guns, drugs.
They asked Tyrone if they could search his car. I was stunned by that because we were just minding our own business in front of my house.
So they then started to provoke us, trying to get us to react.
Everybody started cursing each other out, face to face, man to man. Eventually, I was able to turn things around because I have a golden ticket. My sister Leanna is a cop. I pulled out a badge she'd given me, just to let them know my sister was internal affairs. That's the department with the police themselves. The whole
That's
mood
awesome.
changed. Now they wanted to reason with me instead of being aggressive. How did you feel when I told you about the incident when the cops were messing with me outside?
It bothered me because, here I am, 30 feet from it, not knowing what's going on, and knowing that interaction could have gone either way. It could have gone south very easily. It bothered me very much.
Okay, well, how about this? Do you remember telling me, breaking the news that you were taking the police test?
I don't really remember the exact moment that I told you?
Even though it was 6 years ago, I remember it. I was watching TV in your room, and you said it in passing.
I seem to remember that when I told you, I think I made an excuse as to why, well, you know, it's a good job, and, you know, I was trying to, like, soften the blow that I knew it would be to you.
Did you ever, like, feel like you were switching sides?
Switching sides?
Well, I mean, I'm sure you know how I've, you know, some of my feelings towards the cops in the past.
Yeah, I never really felt that I was on a side to switch. I mean, I don't feel like there's a side of cop versus civilian or us versus them. I think there's right and wrong.
Not too long after Leona became a police officer, word on the street was she was actually patrolling our neighborhood. Apparently, she intervened when a couple of my boys got stopped by other cops. Yo, Jared, your sister is all right. When some real street cats confirmed what she was doing, I could no longer deny it. Leona was different. If only the NYPD had more officers like her.
Jared Marcel is with Radio Rookies out of WNYC. You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News. We're going to go now to a refugee camp in Niger. It's a desolate place in the desert, home to thousands of people who have fled Boko Haram militants. Many people who live there have just come across the border in Nigeria.
Alright, where is my
Of the 65 million people worldwide who are refugees, asylum seekers, or internally displaced. The UN says on
that
this
makes it
World
harder.
Refugee Day, that's the highest number ever recorded. NPR's Ophabia Quist-Arcton has this report.
Close your eyes and you wouldn't know these lively children singing are in Asaga refugee camp in Niger, one of the poorest countries in the world.
So, in this, everyone would be like 4 feet tall.
Forcing Falmata Babagana and her family to flee across the nearby border into southeast Niger's Difa region. The 30-year-old and her 7 children arrived at Asaga refugee camp and are still traumatized by the bloodshed they witnessed at home, she said.
During Ramadan fasting last year, Boko Haram came to our village, rounded up the men at the mosque, and killed about a dozen and burned down our market. Even now, the children dream about Boko Haram and cry. They still tremble. I still tremble.
Babagana and 6,000 refugees from Nigeria and people displaced within Niger's Difa border region live at Asaga camp. It's located along the country's main east-west highway, wind-blown by Sahara desert sands with little protection from the blistering sun. Flimsy straw structures and plastic sheeting pass for dwellings. Babagana says they still feel vulnerable.
Wonder best way to rig
but we fear there may be more terrifying Boko Haram raids.
Boko Haram has indeed struck in Niger, claiming to have killed more than 20 soldiers recently and uprooting about 50,000 people in this southeast border area. Some were fleeing for the 2nd or 3rd time. That's partly because a military coalition of Nigeria and neighboring countries has scattered Boko Haram fighters from their northeastern Nigerian strongholds. In response, the militants have increased their cross-border raids. Niger's Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management Minister Magaji Lawan.
Because of the Boko Haram situation, we have reinforced security and are trying to tackle the problems regarding the lack of food.
That's right. In addition to the security problems, Niger has a food shortage. The unrest has disrupted the country's economy, and now the 80,000 Nigerians who fled here to Niger and at least double that number of internally displaced people struggle to find jobs. Refugee Falmata Babagana says they're
cursor to center,
Back home we ate 3 meals a day. Now it's very difficult. Children can't even concentrate at school because often they don't have food and we don't have sufficient drinking water.
Still, playful children sing and draw water from the well at Niger's Asaga refugee camp. Women in colourful clothes huddle to discuss their problems. Men search for firewood, and jobless young men fiddle with mobile phones, hoping they'll soon be able to return home. Not much chance of that. Ophelia Agustin, NPR News, Difa, southeastern Niger.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
That's Audie Cornish in Washington. I'm Tom Cram. Minnesota Public Radio News as we continue with All Things Considered. Social and emotional skills for your kids. There apparently are apps for that. You're going to hear more about it on All Tech Considered on this Monday afternoon. And after the news at 4, the Senate will vote on 4 different gun-related bills, but all 4 are likely to fail. We're going to get the latest from Capitol Hill after our news at 4.
Support for this program comes from the McKnight Foundation, driving sustainable solutions to help the Midwest be a leader in advancing a clean energy economy. Online at McKnight.org.
I'm Carrie Miller. What would Elizabeth Bennet and Fitzwilliam Darcy be like if they lived in the modern world? Writer Curtis Sittenfeld updated Austen's classic novel Pride and Prejudice. Our Take It to the Lakes, our fiction series continues.
Some of the stories making news this afternoon. Big political story. Donald Trump's former campaign manager says he doesn't know why he was fired, but Corey Lewandowski, who has been with the Trump campaign since its beginning, was dismissed today. He did say he remains a Trump supporter. Lewandowski says he has no regrets about his year managing Trump's campaign. He says the infighting and turmoil that have marked the campaign stemmed in part from his demands for, as he put it, perfection. Dennis Hastard's attorney says the former House Speaker will report to a federal prison in southeastern Minnesota to begin serving a 15-month sentence in his hush money case. Hastard has a Wednesday afternoon deadline to report. A federal judge says Hastard at his sentencing that the Rochester facility would be a good fit for the 74-year-old, partly because it specializes in health care and is near the Mayo Clinic. Hastard is diabetic and suffered a stroke last year. It's 3:50 now.
Selection to
From
cursor.
NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Audie Cornish.
And I'm Kelly McEvers.
There we go.
American kids spend more than 4 hours a day, on average, looking at a screen. Adults check their phones nearly 50 times a day. So we are staring at our screens while they are staring at theirs. But maybe it doesn't have to be that way. On this week's All Tech Considered, we're going to look at the alternatives. NPR's Anya Kamenetz has been testing some new apps that promise to help parents and kids bond and help kids develop the social and emotional skills we now know they need. She joins us now. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kelly.
There's a lot of kid tech out there, for lack of a better phrase. iPad apps for reading and drawing. There's kid podcasts. What's good about these new parent-kid apps?
This is really a totally different take on educational technology. The 2 apps that I looked at here are called Povey and Muse, and both of them are directed at the parents. They go on parents' phones, and they offer reminders or prompts that the parents can use to actually talk to their kids and have conversation or engage in an activity or tell a story.
And you actually tested one of these apps with your daughter. How did that go?
That's right. Povey's still in beta, and the idea with that one is it's going to tell stories actually through a plush, huggable character, and those stories are going to help kids and parents talk about emotions. The one that I tested out is called Muse, and the way that that worked was I'd be home with my daughter or I'd be at work, and I'd get a buzz, and it would ask me a yes or no question designed to gather information about my kid, like, does Lulu like to try new things? And then it would suggest an activity, and the activity would be something really simple, like, next time you're reading a book, stop the story and ask your daughter to predict what happens next. And so this is kind of a typical developmentally appropriate way of reading. It's called dialogic reading, to start a conversation, to get empathy, perspective taking, to get the kid to make predictions. And so it's supposed to be educational and build social and emotional skills at the same time. I didn't do the suggestions every time, but when we did, it was pretty fun. You know, it's easy to get stuck in a rut when you're playing with your kid, and it's nice
to have somebody at your shoulder suggesting something new to do.
How do we know this kind of thing works? Or how do they know, the people who made this app, how do they know it works?
Well, it's interesting. You know, they're drawing on a relatively new field that actually comes over from the health world. And so mobile health information apps that provide timely information to parents have been tried, and they've been succeeded in several different settings. There's one program that's well known called Text for Baby, and it's been used in a lot of different countries to give parents, mothers, from the time that they're pregnant, week by week information that's relevant to their children and all the way through childbirth and afterwards. And so these types of just-in-time reminders or nudges have been shown to improve attitudes, to improve knowledge among parents, and also to improve health outcomes for kids. So the creators of these apps are kind of extrapolating to say, we know that just-in-time information can be helpful, it can motivate behaviors, maybe we can improve social and emotional development as well.
Selection.
I don't want to be a total naysayer here, but I do have to say that when I first read about this, I was like, do I really need a buzz on my phone to remind me to talk to my child and how to talk to my child?
You know, I think it's a really key question. It's something that some of the experts I talked to brought up, that on the one hand, we all feel extremely distracted, and when we're with our kids, it seems like the phone is often buzzing and taking us out of the moment. But the beta testers that I talked to 3 different women who have all been trying out the app Muse, and they all said, you know, usually I'm getting taken out of the moment when I get a buzz on my phone, but in this case, using this app, I actually get a chance to think about my kid, and it's actually pretty helpful to bring me back in the moment. And one person I talked to made a comparison with Fitbit or a health app. Do you really need a reminder to go to bed on time? Do you really need a reminder to climb the stairs instead of the elevator? Maybe not, but on the other hand, it could be helpful.
It's NPR's Anya Kamenetz. Thank you.
Thank you.
We wanted to know how NPR listeners use apps with their kids. Is it mostly you on your screen and them on theirs? Or have you made it a bonding event? Your answers fell loosely into 3 camps.
Some of you said you think letting kids play with apps is a way to take a break for yourself. Fold the laundry, take a shower, get some peace and quiet. Amanda Lauer of Iowa City says she sometimes gets dirty looks from other parents while her 8-year-old son is playing on his iPad at a restaurant. But she says the technology helped them survive his first airplane ride.
I think that there are some apps out there that are not so great, so it's really kind of a sorting process, trying to figure out what's helpful and education.
there.
And she says it is a parent's job to figure that out.
So that's Camp 1. Camp 2 is best exemplified by this dad.
My name is Daniel Crawford, and I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Crawford uses apps with his young children all the time, as in his toddler owns a tablet.
You know, there was some worry at first, you know, with our kids being way too into apps, especially
Okay,
at age. My son only being about 1, he knows how to push the button to wake up the phone, he knows how to swipe through, he knows how to find the apps that he wants to use. But ultimately, we were really excited about the idea of the access of educational tools and knowledge that he had that maybe we never had as kids.
Then there are those special cases where apps are much more than entertainment or education. Heather May of Plainview, Nebraska has a 3-year-old son with autism. He didn't talk for a long time, but she says apps have helped him communicate, learn, and develop as a person.
Some apps, he pushes a button and it'll tell us what he wants. Like if he wants a cup, it'll show us a cup, or it'll show us the sign for a cup, which he eventually did learn how to use. He uses my iPhone. He uses his Kindle. They are making a lot more apps that are just designed for kids with autism. They keep their focus a lot better.
May says they really like Sesame Street videos that help her son talk about his feelings, his likes and dislikes.
I wouldn't know that my son likes dinosaurs, or that he likes Elmo so much, or that he likes trains.
You can read more about how technology influences our lives at the All Tech Considered blog on npr.org. Support for All Tech Considered comes from Chevrolet, featuring the all-new 2016 Chevrolet Malibu and Malibu Hybrid. Learn more at Chevy.com. And from Epson, offering cartridge-free printing with EcoTank, their refillable ink tank printer. EcoTank comes with up to 2 years of ink for printing up to 8,000 pages.
Cursor to selected. Selection to cursor.
Venezuela, the economic crisis is so dire, chaos is breaking out. Electricity blackouts combined with 100-degree heat led to riots and looting last month.
Tomorrow on Morning Edition, we'll hear from a woman in a food line outside of a state-run supermarket. She asks what products they have in stock. Detergent is what they have, she says. How am I going to eat detergent?
We'll have the view from Venezuela tomorrow on Morning Edition.
Can I select cursor to selected? I'm assuming it might be the same, I don't know.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News.
Programming is supported by the Flint Hills Resources Refinery in Rosemount, which recently completed more than $400 million in projects that reduced key emissions and improved reliability. Learn more at pinebendrefinery.com.
Selection to cursor.
Pretty nice afternoon, all in all. Sunny and 70 on the Iron Range right now. Sunny and 75 in St. Cloud. And it's
strange.
79, a few clouds in Red Wing, 79 and sunny in Austin, and here in the Twin Cities. We've got, well, we'll call it partly cloudy. Cloudy at the airport, apparently. 79 degrees in the Twin Cities, officially. Enjoy this Monday the 20th. It's Minnesota Public Radio News.
Tune into Morning Edition and discover news that matters. From Aleppo to your neighborhood, Morning Edition is live, relevant, and timely. Morning Edition on NPR News. Discover what matters.
Your local forecast for the Twin Cities. A cooler, sunny day. We've got that cold Canadian air now after the very warm, muggy weekend. Then the storms today, upper 70s. Pretty much picture perfect. Clear tonight, lows in the upper 50s. Tomorrow, a mostly sunny Tuesday. Once again, a pretty nice day. Highs in the lower 80s. And then the chance of showers and thunderstorms Tuesday night after midnight. Wednesday, 40% chance of showers and thunderstorms. Highs, upper 70s. And there's your forecast.
Toxic algae blooms can make our lakes unsafe for swimming. Some Minnesota cabins have septic systems that leak sewage into bodies of water. The resources we take for granted are at risk. Learn what's at stake at nprnews.org/environment.
Jesus makes it so hard. Is there...
Bills are expected to fail today in the U.S. Senate.
Shift A, armature, pitch boy, human.
Each to expand background checks on gun buyers and curb gun sales for
same.
individuals on terrorism watch lists after the Orlando massacre. It's All Things Considered on Minnesota Public Radio News with Kelly McEvers and Audie Cornish. I'm Tom Cran. Also ahead, Donald Trump fires his embattled campaign manager after internal staff struggles and negative press for the expected GOP nominee. Plus, 3 New York Police Department commanders were arrested today as a result of an investigation into Mayor Bill de Blasio's campaign fundraising. And Nina Totenberg reports on a Supreme Court decision regarding the Fourth Amendment. That's all ahead in this next half hour. But first, our 4 o'clock hour begins with this roundup of the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. The FBI and the Justice Department have changed their minds and are releasing a full transcript of the Orlando gunman's first call to 911. Here's how the Shahani
you know what?
team referred to ISIS twice in the call.
This is an unusual law enforcement initially released a redacted transcript in which Omar said, quote, "I pledge allegiance to," and ended there, not saying to whom he pledged his allegiance. Florida Governor Rick Scott criticized the redaction and said victims' families want answers.
Oh, God.
Now the FBI and Justice Department have decided to share the unreleased portions of the call in which Mateen pledges allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi of the Islamic State. In a statement, federal officials say they didn't want to give the terrorist organization publicity, but redacting has caused an unnecessary distraction. Arthi Shahani, NPR News, Orlando.
In Baltimore, prosecutors have made their final case against the driver of the police van in which a young black man, Freddie Gray, suffered a fatal neck injury last year. NPR's Jennifer Ludden has more in closing arguments in the case against Officer Cesar Goodson.
Prosecutors say Officer Goodson repeatedly failed to seatbelt Gray and failed to call for medical help. They also accuse him of driving the van too roughly at one point, causing Gray to fall and break his neck. David Jaros of the University of Baltimore says any conviction requires showing that Goodson meant to harm Gray.
So if Officer Goodson made egregious mistakes that day, if he didn't act as we would want him to act, it doesn't necessarily mean he's guilty of the crime.
Goodson's defense attorneys blamed Gray for his injury because he stood up in the van, and they say he showed no outward appearance of being hurt. Judge Barry Williams will issue a verdict Thursday. Jennifer Ludden, NPR News, Baltimore.
Speaking to several thousand international investors, some of whom are looking to locate businesses in the U.S., Obama made another pitch for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. Obama looking to counter some of the arguments against the trade deal that have been coming from the respective presidential candidates, and saying the U.S. is better able than most to benefit from it.
In large part because the decisions we've made since the
that seriously sucks. That basically means I'm back to square one, or 7.
Trade has become one of a number of hot-button issues in the upcoming presidential election, with presumptive nominees from both parties voicing objections to the 12-nation deal. On the grounds they say it will result in job losses and lower wages for U.S. workers. Supreme Court without comment rejected an appeal from smokers in Illinois who sought to have a $10.1 billion class action judgment reinstated against tobacco giant Philip Morris. Justices opting to leave in place an Illinois Supreme Court decision in favor of the cigarette maker. Smokers in their appeal objected to the participation of a justice who they said benefited from tobacco money. On Wall Street, the Dow closed up 129 points. This is NPR.
Support for news comes from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, supporting creative people and effective institutions committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information is online at macfound.org.
Minnesota Public Radio News, I'm Stephen John. The man killed when a windstorm blew through northern Minnesota has been identified as the brother of Congressman Tim Walz. Craig Walz was struck by a fallen tree last night while camping in the BWCA. His son Jacob was seriously injured. Craig Walz was a teacher at St. Charles High School. Cook County officials say another camper was injured in a separate incident. Elsewhere, a Weather Service meteorologist in Duluth said a large tree fell on a home and injured a resident in Crow County. In Minneapolis, 2 cars were crushed by a tree that fell near Lake Calhoun. One of 4 people in one of the cars suffered injuries. The Minnesota Department of Health has issued a warning about handling baby chicks or other young poultry. Over the past several months, there have been 9 cases of salmonella in Minnesota linked to handling young birds. Department veterinarian Stacy Holtzbauer says even birds that look clean can have enough bacteria on their feathers or feet to make a person sick.
Essentially, the birds are defecating in their own environment, and the bugs can be quite hardy outside of the intestinal tract as well. And so, wash your hands after handling the birds or anything in their environment.
The health department recommends several precautions, including preventing children under 5 from handling poultry and not nuzzling or kissing young birds. Chicks are typically sold at farm supply stores during the springtime. Chicken products company GNP says police are investigating a case of product tampering in its Cold Spring processing plant. The news comes as the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced GNP officials are recalling nearly 28 tons of chicken products. Most of the recalled items are sold in large cases for food service and bulk purchases, but 4-pound bags of just bare whole chicken are also being recalled, and they're available in grocery stores. No illnesses associated with the product have been reported. Partly sunny and 76 degrees at the Twin Cities Airport this hour. This is Minnesota Public Radio News at 4:06.
All Things Considered is supported by University of Minnesota Health, leaders in neurosurgical techniques for treatment of stroke, brain tumor, and pediatric brain conditions. All treated with expert precision and compassion. mhealth.org.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Audie Cornish.
And I'm Kelly McEvers. In the next hour, the Senate will begin voting on 4 gun proposals, and they are all expected to fail. This comes after Senate Democrats held the floor for 15 hours last week, pressuring Republicans to schedule votes on stronger gun control measures. Lawmakers on both sides acknowledge there is little chance these votes will change anything. With us now to talk about this is NPR congressional correspondent Elsa Chang. Hi, Elsa.
Hey.
And first, tell us about these 4 proposals that the Senate is voting on right now.
Well, the two that have gotten the most attention are competing proposals on how to deal with the terror watch list. Both Democrats and Republicans agree that terrorists shouldn't be able to buy guns. That's simple enough, but where they disagree is what to do when the government isn't sure if someone is a terrorist. The Democrats have been proposing that the Justice Department have the power to stop anyone who's been on the terror watch list within the last 5 years from buying a gun. Meanwhile, Republicans have been pushing a measure that would let the government permanently stop someone on the terror watch list from buying a gun only if the government can convince a judge that there's probable cause the person is a terrorist.
That sounds like a difficult thing to do. I mean, is that why Democrats are against that particular measure?
Pretty much. I mean, their argument, the Democrats' argument has been if the government really had that much evidence, enough for probable cause, which is a really high evidentiary standard,
I don't even know
then
if
that person would have been arrested already for being a known or a suspected terrorist.
much.
And Republicans have said that's exactly the point. If you don't have very strong evidence that someone will commit terrorism, you shouldn't be limiting that person's Second Amendment rights. But Democrats say that's a very disingenuous argument. Here's how Chris Murphy of Connecticut put it.
Now, I haven't heard these due process concerns when it comes to the right of Americans to travel. So we didn't hear any of these concerns about due process when the no-fly list was working effectively for years and years.
I don't see a difference.
The two other gun proposals, they are about background checks, right? And we've seen legislation like this before, haven't we?
We have. Democrats proposed nearly the same exact measure in 2013 after the shootings in Newtown, and it failed then. It would require background checks by private sellers, even at gun shows and over the internet. The Republican proposal tonight focuses on people who are flagged as mentally ill during a background check. The measure would allow those people more ways to challenge that determination.
All right, so for some time now, it has been widely assumed that all four of these measures would fail. Why is that?
Well, Republicans I've talked to have said that it's just too soon.
I don't see much of a difference.
On one hand, there was this great urgency to act right after the shootings in Orlando, but they say there hasn't been enough time for lawmakers to change their minds. Remember, these terror watch list proposals actually already failed in the Senate last December after the San Bernardino shootings. And Bob Corker of Tennessee, a Republican, told me last week that if you wanted to convince senators to vote differently this time around, you would need more hearings, you would need more conversations. He says most of his colleagues still don't get what these terror watch lists are.
We're going to vote with almost no one understanding how these lists are put together, or how they're adjudicated, how you get off of them. And it's just, it's a shame.
So Corker says right now he resents being put in a position where he has to vote on something that doesn't get any closer to a solution. He says tonight is all about political theater.
That's NPR congressional correspondent Elsa Chang on 4 gun measures that are likely to fail in the Senate. Thank you, Elsa.
Wait a minute.
When it became clear that Donald Trump would be the Republican nominee for president, there were supporters who predicted that he would tone down his inflammatory rhetoric, and Republicans who hoped he would act more like a conventional politician. Well, that hasn't happened, but today Trump did make one big change. He fired his original campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. NPR's Sarah McCammon is covering the Trump campaign, and Sarah, to begin, why was Lewandowski kicked out?
You know, Adi, there has been tension in the campaign for a long time. Corey Lewandowski has been with Trump from the beginning, and he didn't have a lot of political experience, but he and Trump kind of clicked. Lewandowski led a shoestring campaign without a lot of staff or traditional fundraising or traditional organization, and, you know, that worked well in the primaries. Obviously, Trump is the presumptive nominee, but largely it worked because of the force of Trump's personality and his ability to draw those big crowds and lots of press coverage. So, you know, Trump liked this. He didn't want to run a typical campaign, and he saw his organization as efficient and lean and mean. But eventually, as it became clear that Trump could really become the GOP nominee, he began to make newer hires in an effort to become a more traditional campaign. Some of those were more experienced operatives. And in an interview with CNN today, Corey Lewandowski acknowledged that things had been changing.
As you look at how small this team has been and how close-knit this team has been, it's really important to know that there are highs and lows in every campaign, and we've been through them together. And in order to be successful, we need to continue to build that team and build those relationships with the RNC and utilize the resources that they have available to us. So that's where the campaign is going, and it's been a great privilege. And look, I wouldn't change 1 second.
And so, Audie, we've known that there's been a bit of a power struggle between those factions, the old and new, in the campaign for a while. We've heard from sources, though, that Trump liked that competition. He saw it as generating good ideas and was keeping Lewandowski on in part because of his loyalty to him. But there still isn't a robust national organization, and ultimately today we saw that Corey Lewandowski had to answer for that.
Now, for a long time, there were significant episodes of bad press for the Trump campaign that was essentially focused on Lewandowski. But you mentioned loyalty there. It means a lot to Donald Trump, right? And did that come into play here?
Well, Lewandowski's been a controversial figure for months, and he's had multiple confrontations with reporters, and especially, you may remember, back in March, he was accused by Michelle Fields, formerly of Breitbart News, of grabbing her as she tried to ask Trump a question. Lewandowski appeared to grab her on a security video, but that charge was ultimately dropped by prosecutors, and Trump stuck by him through that. Behind the scenes, he's been seen as a divisive figure. He's had enemies inside the campaign, including some of those newer hires, and he said himself that he is an intense person. But again, Trump was very loyal to him. He was very loyal to Trump, and still, from some of the things he's said today, seems to be.
Now, we're less than 5 months away from Election Day, and I know kind of in Washington that people are really talking about this. How unusual is it to make this change now, and what does it mean in terms of looking at the Trump campaign?
Well, it doesn't look good for the campaign, but I think we're seeing a lot of things leading up to this. Trump's poll numbers are dropping, and that's the thing he's been touting throughout the primary is his strong poll numbers. He's had a couple of bad weeks. His comments about a judge of Mexican descent and his response to the Orlando shooting were widely panned, including by Republicans. So he's really been struggling to move into general election mode. There's a pattern of Trump being in the midst of bad headlines, then saying or doing something that redirects the conversation. So, there's a lot coming out tonight. We're going to see the latest campaign fundraising numbers when Hillary Clinton is expected to announce a large haul, and Trump has been playing catch up in a big way. So, in terms of whether or not, though, anything changes going forward, on the one hand, this shows us that Trump is willing to take advice from those close to him. But, in the past, we've heard him talk again and again about pivoting toward the general election. Hasn't really done that. So now we have to see whether or not, without Lewandowski's influence, if Trump will evolve and if this advice is going to extend to changing his campaign style and rhetoric.
That's NPR's Sarah McCammon speaking to us from New York. Sarah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Today is a good day in Cleveland. Like, really good. The Cavaliers pulled off something last night that hasn't happened for the city in more than 50 years. They won a pro sports championship. The Cavs were down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals. No team had ever come back from that deficit. Last night, the Cavs pulled it off with a 93-89 win in Game 7. David C. Barnett of WCPN Idea Stream reports it is a therapeutic victory.
Thousands of fans were on hand on a hot, sunny day to greet the Cavs when their plane landed this afternoon. Deborah Watkins came here with her grandkids.
They needed to see this. They needed to see what a championship was. This is my first time seeing a real championship. At least I'm old enough to see it now. And I want to share this with them.
The last time a major pro Cleveland team had a sports championship was when the Browns won in 1964. The intervening years have been painful. There was the fumble that lost the Browns the 1987 AFC championship, Michael Jordan's shot that stole the 1989 NBA title from the Cavs, and the loss of the 1997 World Series in the bottom of the 9th inning. Akron Beacon Journal sports writer George Thomas says it has indelibly shaped fans here.
The Browns have probably lost 2 generations of fans. When LeBron left the first time, the Cavs were in danger of doing the same thing, but this changes all that, I think.
Cleveland native and lifelong sports fan Brad Sellers was 2 years old when the Browns won the 1964 championship.
Sometimes you can feel like you're second class, that you're not quite good enough. So last night, it was a lot of therapy for a lot of people last night.
Sellers is now the mayor of the Cleveland suburb of Warrensville Heights, but in 1989 he was a member of the Chicago Bulls squad that robbed the Cavaliers of an NBA championship. In fact, it was Sellers who fed the ball to superstar Michael Jordan, which led to Jordan's game-winning basket with seconds to go.
It's not a week really that goes by that somebody doesn't ask me about either the shot, how does it feel to be at the demise of your own hometown, and So there's a lot of therapy in there for me, too.
It was an unprecedented comeback for the Cavs. Until last night, no team in NBA history that was down 3-1 had won Game 7. Standing outside the team's plane this afternoon, LeBron James hoisted the NBA trophy into the air to the adoring fans. Fans like George Theodore.
Cleveland has waited so long for this to happen, and
Let's
they deserve it. The fans here are like next to nothing. They're the best.
The city will honor the hometown heroes with something that sports fans here have hungered for 52 years, a celebratory parade. For NPR News, I'm David C. Barnett in Cleveland.
DFB997. DFB997.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
That's Odie Cornish in Washington. I'm Tom Cran, Minnesota Public Radio News. Stay with us. You're going to hear more about 3 New York Police Department commanders who were arrested today as a result of an investigation into Mayor de Blasio's campaign fundraising. That's coming up. And Robert Siegel reporting from London on British members of Parliament paying tribute to their colleague Joe Cox, who was shot and stabbed to death last week.
Programming is supported by SFM Mutual Insurance, focused on workers' comp programs that can create long-term positive results for employers and their employees. You can ask your independent insurance agent or visit sfmworkerscomp.com. Programming is supported by Bremer Bank, offering a variety of business banking services to help new and established businesses turn goals into action. You can visit bremer.com to learn more. Bremer Bank, for what's ahead.
Some of the other stories making news this afternoon on Wall Street. Stocks finishing solidly higher today as investors grow more optimistic that Britain will remain in the European Union. But we're going to keep hearing about this all week when it comes to investors.
Why am I
and the
not
markets.
able to
Industrial and
select the
consumer stocks
color?
had some of the biggest gains. The British pound and European stocks rose sharply as investors hoped that a British vote Thursday to remain in the EU would avoid a blow to the European economy. So at the end of the day, the Dow Industrial Average up 129 points higher. The S&P 500 gained 12 points, and the Nasdaq picked up 36. And you'll hear more about all of it on Marketplace. Comes your way at 6:30 here on Minnesota Public Radio News on this Monday afternoon after a pretty steamy weekend. A pretty nice afternoon in progress. Sunny and 73 in Fargo-Moorhead. Sunny and 73 in Duluth, too.
Support for news comes from Hiscox Insurance, providing customized insurance for small and medium businesses so they can do more and be more. Hiscox Insurance. Encourage courage. Learn more at hiscox.com or from an agent. And Novo Nordisk, whose website, actfordiabetes.com, is an advocacy tool for patients with diabetes, people at risk of diabetes, and family members and friends of people affected by diabetes. More at actfordiabetes.com.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Kelly McEvers.
And I'm Audie Cornish. A federal investigation in New York City is revealing a culture of back-scratching and outright corruption at the highest levels of the NYPD. Federal prosecutors announced charges today against senior police officials and others, including a political contributor to the mayor. Here to talk about this big ongoing investigation is WNYC reporter Robert Lewis. And Robert, to start, we know upwards of 4 police officials were charged today. What happened?
Well, there was a sergeant in the gun licensing division of the NYPD who apparently accepted bribes in exchange for fast-tracking pistol licenses. There was a police officer
Oh, what happened? Did I? Oh, I closed it, didn't I? Whoops.
And the others?
Well, 2 of the highest-ranking officers in the department, a deputy chief and a deputy inspector, they allegedly got expensive gifts, trips, even prostitutes from a politically connected businessman who, in return, got favors from these cops. This is actually U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara talking about the case, announcing the charges.
They got, in effect, a private police force for themselves and their friends. Effectively, they got cops on call.
Now, this is part of a larger investigation. How do these arrests tie into that?
Well, when news first broke in April, there was this multi-tentacled probe, and these cases sort of start to fill in the blanks and show how they're connected. There's a Ponzi scheme up in Harlem. There's this gun licensing probe. Just earlier this month, the head of the jail guard union was arrested and charged with corruption. And many of these cases involve these same businessmen sort of using their money to get favors and influence with officials.
Now, how significant is this for the NYPD?
Well, it seems to be a pretty big deal. We've already seen close to a dozen high-ranking NYPD officials either put on modified duty or having left the department as part of this probe. And every 20 years, there really seems to be some sort of major corruption scandal in the NYPD, and we're pretty much at that 20-year mark. Worth noting, Commissioner William Bratton sort of downplayed the notion that there's something deeper, bigger going on. He said that this isn't like those past probes, corruption investigations. This is just an issue with a few individuals.
Police officers, especially high-ranking members of the department, have to know better, need to know better, and have to set the example for others and have to follow the law.
In the charging documents, there are allegations that even lower-level officers sort of knew about what was going on. They were, maybe pulling over someone on a parking ticket and knew that, oh, wait, this is a friend of the deputy chief, so maybe we should let them off. So I think there are some serious questions about how deep this went.
Before I let you go, what can you tell us about any connection there can be to the mayor's office?
The businessman who was paying these alleged bribes or giving gifts to these high-ranking police officials, one of them was Jeremy Reichberg. He's a fundraiser to the mayor. Certainly there's been a lot of chatter that these probes are looking at donors to the mayor. That being said, U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara was very clear in today's press conference saying that this case does not connect directly to the mayor's office.
That's Robert Lewis from WNYC. Thank you for sharing your reporting.
You're welcome.
If a police officer illegally stops and detains someone, can evidence gathered in that time be used against the individual? Today, the U.S. Supreme Court said yes in one particular scenario. The court said police who stop a person for no stated reason can check for an outstanding warrant, and if they find one, they can conduct a search and use that evidence to prosecute. NPR Legal Affairs correspondent Nina Totenberg reports.
The Supreme Court has long held that when police illegally stop or search someone without, at minimum, reasonable suspicion, any incriminating evidence they find cannot be used in court. There are, however, exceptions to this rule, and today the Supreme Court carved out a new and big one, giving police far broader authority to search people who were stopped for no stated reason. The decision came in the case of Edward Streif, who was stopped after leaving a house that was under police observation because of an anonymous tip that it was being used for drug dealing. Though narcotics detective Douglas Fackrell later admitted he had no reason to believe Streif
Oh, this would have to have less triangles, though.
Him, demanded that he identify himself, and detained him while radioing in to see if there were any outstanding warrants against Streif. As it turned out, there was one for a minor traffic offense, so the detective searched Streif and found a small amount of methamphetamines. The Utah Supreme Court later threw out the drug conviction because it stemmed from an illegal stop. Today, however, the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the conviction. Writing for the 5-justice majority, Justice Clarence Thomas said that Officer Fackrell's discovery of the outstanding warrant broke the connection to the unconstitutional stop, and that therefore the evidence found in the search could be used to prosecute Streif. The generally liberal Justice Stephen Breyer provided the 5th vote to make a majority. The court's 3 other liberals dissented in 2 separate opinions. Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote a barn burner. Today's decision, she said, will allow police, as here, to stop someone on what amounts to a whim or a hunch, and then leverage that stop to conduct a search based on a minor outstanding warrant that the cop didn't know about to begin with. She noted that according to state and federal databases, there are over 7.8 million open warrants, the vast majority of which are for minor offenses. In metropolitan St. Louis, she observed, the Justice Department found that officers routinely stop people on the street, at bus stops, or even in courthouses for no reason other than to check whether the subject has an outstanding warrant. Jonathan Smith was, until 2015, the chief of the Justice Department section that conducted systemic investigations of police misconduct.
The combined effect of this immense number of warrants that are out there for very, very minor offenses, with practices like stop and frisk and the kinds of conduct you saw in the Shreve case by the Supreme Court today, are creating, this huge tension between communities, particularly communities of color, and their police, and they're not promoting public safety.
Lauren Brooke Eisen, a former prosecutor now at the Brennan Center's Justice Program, says today's ruling can be an incentive for police to concentrate illegal stops on neighborhoods where there are the most outstanding warrants.
And the reason that's such a scary proposition is because most of the people in this country who have open warrants are poor.
Too poor to pay a lawyer to get rid of the warrant. Justice Sotomayor concluded her dissent today, writing, she said, for herself alone, based on her personal experiences. By legitimizing the conduct in this case, the court tells everyone, white and black, guilty and innocent, that you can be stopped at any time, she said. It says that your body is subject to invasion, while courts excuse the violation of your rights. It implies that you are not a citizen of a democracy. We must not pretend that the countless people who are routinely targeted by police are, as the majority maintains, isolated cases, she said. Until their voices matter too, our justice system will continue to be anything but. Nina Totenberg, NPR News, Washington.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna render this.
This is NPR News.
Hi folks, what would you say if every week a single podcast could deliver to you all of the best things?
I have to go out and start
I'm in. Join that
mowing
guy,
the lawn.
Jeffrey Tambor, and check out the Dinner Party download
But,
wherever you get your podcasts.
Local forecast
I don't know, I
for
think
the
this is
Twin
pretty good so
Cities.
far.
Cooler, sunny day. We've got that cold Canadian air now after the very warm, muggy weekend.
I wish I
And
could
the
just
storms
get the
today, upper
material
70s,
view,
pretty much
actually.
picture perfect. Clear tonight, lows in the upper 50s. Tomorrow, a mostly sunny Tuesday. Once again, a pretty nice day. Highs in the lower 80s. And then the chance of showers and thunderstorms Tuesday night after midnight. Wednesday, 40% chance of showers and thunderstorms. Highs upper 70s. And there's your forecast.
Arctic cat stock has fallen by more than 50% in the last year, but a recent survey finds that manufacturing executives are optimistic about the future. We give you business
Well, the mouse
news in
wouldn't.
context.
The mouth
Just go to
would not move, so.
nprnews.org/business.
Ahead on All Things Considered, British members of Parliament have been paying tribute to their colleague Joe Cox, who was shot and stabbed to death this week. And British Prime Minister David Cameron is taking a huge risk in offering the British people a referendum on European Union membership. We're going to find out why he may now have a significant battle on his hands. Plus, new data from the Education Department show thousands of preschoolers are being suspended each year. First news at 4:30.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Louise Schiavone. After initially releasing an edited transcript, federal authorities have now released the full and unedited transcript of the Orlando gunman's 911 call the night of his deadly shooting rampage. In the call, gunman Omar Mateen declares support for the leader of ISIS and takes responsibility for the shooting. The latest mass gun violence is energizing a push in the U.S. Senate to tighten gun control, although none of the bills under consideration are expected to secure the filibuster-proof 60 votes required to move forward. Senator John Cornyn of Texas opposes the efforts.
Our colleagues want to make this about gun control when what we should be making this about is the fight to eliminate the Islamic extremism that is the root cause for what happened in Orlando.
There is growing support for a compromise effort to ban gun sales to suspected terrorists. A major shakeup in the Trump campaign. Campaign manager Corey Lewandowski was fired today. NPR's Don Gagne reports.
Lewandowski was a political operative with no real national profile prior to becoming Trump's campaign manager more than a year ago. He is brash and outspoken, not unlike his candidate, and helped Trump outlast a large field of GOP presidential hopefuls. But lately, the campaign has been plagued by infighting.
So this is, I guess this is what all the chibi people would look like. Pretty much 4 feet tall.
He is out. He told CNN he doesn't know why, but cast it in a positive light.
It's really important to know that there are highs and lows in every campaign, and we've been through them together. And in order to be successful, we need to continue to build that team.
This shakeup comes less than a month before the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. Don Gagnier, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, the Dow closed up 129. The NASDAQ was up 36. This is NPR.
Programming on Minnesota Public Radio is supported by our members and by Pentair, the official sustainable water provider to the Minnesota Twins. You can learn more online at pentair.com.
From Minnesota Public Radio News, I'm Stephen John. A judge has set bail at $1.5 million for a religious sect leader who's charged with sexually abusing girls at a secluded compound in rural Minnesota. Victor Bernard made his first court appearance in Pine County today.
Alright, so this will be tune 1.
Last week, prosecutors
Let's get a
charged
photo
Bernard in
shot.
2014 with 59 counts for allegedly having sexual relationships with 2 girls at his River Road Fellowship near Finlayson. He was arrested in Brazil last year after being on the most wanted list of the U.S. Marshals Service. Alina Health says replacing striking nurses at 5 hospitals will cost well over $10 million. At a news conference today, CEO Penny Wheeler said the tab will definitely top the $14 million mark that hit that Alina took in dealing with a one-day strike in 2010, but she says it's unclear how much the final cost could be for the one-week strike now in its second day.
It depends on, gosh, when could we get this settled? What are the needs? How long might it go on? And those kinds of things. So I can't give you a cost on that. It's in the millions.
Nurses struck yesterday after the union and Alina management failed to reach a contract agreement on health insurance. Wheeler says the nurses' current health care plan is unsustainable and unaffordable and must end, but she indicated Alina is willing to work on a gradual shift toward a corporate plan that already covers the vast majority of Alina employees. A Wisconsin city's unprecedented request to draw its water supply from Lake Michigan has met some late opposition from U.S. and Canadian mayors. The 8 Great Lakes governors meet tomorrow in Chicago for a final vote on Waukesha's plan to tap lake water and return fully treated wastewater. Mayors across the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Basin are urging the governors to reject Waukesha's request. The Milwaukee suburb would be the first community outside the Great Lakes drainage basin to use lake water since a compact to protect the lakes became law in 2008. Waukesha is making the request.
Actually, no, it does not work.
Contaminated wells. Minnesota abstained from the original vote to allow the plan to go forward. Mostly clear skies, cooler overnight, lows upper 40s in the Arrowhead to the upper 50s in southwestern Minnesota. Tomorrow mostly sunny and pleasant. 76 degrees in the Twin Cities at 4:35.
Support for news comes from Squarespace, providing tools to help people showcase their passions with a customizable landing page, website, or online store. Learn more at squarespace.com/NPR. And Lumosity, brain training with games to challenge memory, attention, and problem solving. From scientists and game designers exploring new ways to research human cognition. Learn more at lumosity.com.
I can't do this yet, actually.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Kelly McEvers in Washington.
And I'm Robert Siegel in London. Members of the British Parliament returned to London today to pay tribute to a colleague. Joe Cox, the first-term Labour Party member from the north of England, was shot and stabbed to death last week. The MPs had been on recess, many campaigning ahead of this week's referendum on whether to stay in the European Union. Now they were together in the House of Commons.
Order. Colleagues, we meet today in heartbreaking sadness, but also in heartfelt solidarity.
That's John.
Alright, this is getting annoying.
Prime Minister David Cameron spoke of Cox's impact on others.
Joe Cox was a voice of compassion, whose irrepressible spirit and boundless energy lit up the lives of all who knew her.
After the tributes, a church service was held in Joe Cox's honor. Her Labour Labour Party colleague Alison McGovern choked up as she described Cox as a unifying force, citing her maiden speech last year.
When Joe spoke, Mr. Speaker, we all listened. Why? Because the principles you drew on in that speech and in life is the simple idea that we have more in common than that which divides us.
British politician Joe Cox would have turned 42 on Wednesday. Thursday's referendum in the UK about staying in or pulling out of the European Union looks like it'll be close, according to the polls, and it's emerging as a crucial test for Prime Minister Cameron. Cameron called for the referendum, hoping that it would silence Eurosceptics within his own Conservative Party. But as NPR's Peter Kenyon reports, that strategy appears in danger of backfiring, and Cameron's political future is on the line.
David Cameron was politely applauded as he came before a BBC audience Sunday night, but citizens' questions soon turned hostile. Cameron was accused of scaremongering on national security issues and of misleading the public on immigration.
Why in your manifesto did you say you would bring down the number of EU immigrants down to the thousands when you knew very well you couldn't control these numbers?
What I don't understand is, with all these experts that you've got saying we should stay in, why the British public isn't more convinced? Why is Brexit in the lead?
Finally, when an angry questioner compared him to Neville Chamberlain, the World War II-era Prime Minister who negotiated with Adolf Hitler, Cameron gave his most heated reply and sounded a lot like a leader fighting for his political life.
At my office, I sit 2 yards away from the cabinet room where Winston Churchill decided in May 1940 to fight on against Hitler, the best and greatest decision perhaps anyone's ever made in our country, right? He didn't quit on Europe, he didn't quit on European democracy, he didn't quit on European freedom. We want to fight for those things today, and you can't win, you can't fight if you're not in the room.
How did this savvy Conservative Party politician, who shocked the pollsters just a year ago by winning a solid majority in Parliament, find himself in such straits? Ironically, it was in part because he thought holding this referendum would put the lingering debate over Europe to rest. Steve Coulter, who teaches political economy at the London School of Economics, says the key to Cameron's strategy was to negotiate more autonomy for the UK from Brussels, which would allow him to convince voters that staying in the EU was the best option.
He came back with a very, very limited and thin set of concessions which did not please many people. I think Cameron probably thought he could buy some sort of deal and the referendum would be a formality. It's not worked out that way, and he's got a huge battle on his hands.
In some ways, David Cameron is a classic example of a privileged Tory politician. He's from a wealthy family with ties to King William IV and was educated at the elite schools Eton and Oxford. But he came to power with a mission to shake the party free from the demands of its right flank, the anti-Europe, anti-immigrant wing that has objected to British membership in the EU ever since it joined. Unfortunately for Cameron, says political scientist Philip Cowley at Queen Mary's College, he misjudged the depth of the split in his own party and the worries about immigration.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly upload that. I actually want to do a poll. Can I do a poll on here? I can do a poll on my thing.
Listening to expert advice from their political and economic leaders.
And so when you've got people like the Governor of the Bank of England coming on and saying this will be damaging for the economy if we leave the EU, that advice is being swept away in a sort of anti-establishment wave of protest.
It's reached the point now where people are wondering how long Cameron might stay on as Prime Minister, even if he wins the vote on Thursday. And if it's a vote to pull out of the EU, Professor Steve Coulter says Cameron will be under huge pressure from within his party to step down.
Many of the leading Brexit people have said they've had enough of the way the campaign has been waged. They will blame Cameron for leading Britain through all this sort of muck. So I think the Conservative Party in this present mood will probably mount some sort of coup, and his chances of surviving it, I think, will be fairly small.
Cameron and his
Publishing
supporters say
tools.
he has no intention of stepping down,
Whoa.
and he has surprised his critics before. But the EU referendum is likely to have a lasting, perhaps defining impact on the Prime Minister's career
I hope
and his
so.
legacy. Peter Kenyon, NPR News, London.
A political party that was founded by a comedian has gained control of cities across Italy. The Five Star Movement won 19 of the 20 local elections over the weekend, including in Rome.
I can do it on
NPR's
Twitter
London
though.
Reports the winner
Hey,
is the
hey,
city's
Ponky.
first female mayor, and at 37, its youngest.
Is that? Or is it Punkay? think it was Punkay.
As results poured in last night, giving Virginia
I already forgot. How are you doing?
of votes cast in Rome, her supporters cheered.
So this is the little chibi version.
Many say it's up
Let
to
me bring
you
that up.
now to solve
Right
all
now I'm
city's
posting it
problems.
to Twitter. Which one do you like better? This one would be for mobile. All of them would be around this height. This one would be the original. Let me quickly post that on my Facebook.
The results dealt a blow to the governing Democratic Party of
Should I
Prime
make?
Minister
I'm wondering if I should make like a small mobile game, and I think I've explained this already, like Soul Hunters, where they're like attacking from both sides.
and insecurity over economic stagnation.
It should make it easier to rig, sort of. Oh wow, that's not good.
Economic establishment. The movement is anti-European Union and is allied in the UK.
Stylized little dude. That's good.
Political scientist Roberto
I might have to make it less
movement cannot be compared to other populist
less triangles. Ew, why is this? I have to fix that too. I mean, I'm gonna obviously have to face a lot of it, but is this? On mobile, it's gonna look like this, I think. Let me see.
The biggest challenge will be Rome. This 3,000-year-old city filled with ruins is resistant to technological advances such as subway lines, and it has been mired in widespread corruption and mismanagement. Dalimonte thinks the chances of fixing it
So I'm
are
going
slim.
for like little people kind of like this, which this is obviously still larger, which means I might have to make this smaller too. I mean, it could just be 3 people.
Should Raji succeed in improving public
Like your
services
favorite
and fulfilling
team
her
of
campaign
3.
slogan of legality and transparency,
I haven't
she
actually
and the five-star
figured
movement
out
could then turn their sights toward the next goal, national
how I
power.
want to do this.
Sylvia Poljoli, NPR News, Rome.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
I'm Heather McElhatton, and this is A Beautiful World,
Let me
bringing
see
you
something.
inspirational stories from around the globe.
We really are promoting the redefinition of family, what it means to be a family, and in crisis, how do you stay together as a family?
That's Rita Garza. She works at the Urban Resource Institute in New York City. It's one of the largest resource providers.
I kind of want to try a robot game, actually.
They run shelters all over the city where men and women can escape violent relationships and rebuild their lives. In 2013, Rita helped launch a new
think that would be
program
cooler.
welcomes a previously banned family member into shelters.
Because,
program is
oh
called
no.
PALS.
Let me turn
Stands
this off.
for people and animals.
It, I think the interviewing part where we talked went well, but the technical proficiencies, switching to a bulky Windows keyboard and like one of those cheap mice, it didn't go too great. And then Photoshop on Windows looks completely different. Some of the things didn't work as they would work on a Mac. Like, you could just, I could probably quickly show you actually. So usually in Illustrator, if you have something like this, and I'm just going to erase all of this, and then erase all of this. Usually when you transfer it from Illustrator, Photoshop, just gonna quickly move this over here. The Mac version anyway, it comes in as a PNG and it has that transparency that I just did. Now on a PC or Windows, it's pure white. Which actually, let me make sure it's not pure white here. Yeah, okay, so it actually has a transparency. for some reason, when I kept doing it on their computer, every time I brought it in, it just... Basically, I had to save it as a PNG and then stick it inside of the... inside of Illustrator, and then for some reason their computer froze for like 20 seconds while I was trying to save it as a PNG, and I only had like 10 minutes to complete my objective. It was like a 5-minute project, a 10-minute project, and a 20-minute project. 5-minute project I did extremely fast, but that was just a selection thing. The 10 and 20-minute project, like, I was just frustrated with the program. I was just searching for shit. I didn't really get to finish them. I did a really crappy version on the third one just so I could get finished. And then, because like I started erasing all around the picture, and then I was like, I don't have time for this, so I just quickly made an oval, cropped everything else out, which I couldn't even find those hotkeys. So, yeah, basically everything was different. The hotkeys weren't working. And it was like using a whole different thing of Photoshop. Like switching from PaintShop Pro 7 to Photoshop or something. It was just completely different. And there's a help menu on the Mac version. On the Windows there isn't. So when I couldn't find something, I went to the help menu. And I was like, damn. It doesn't even have a freaking search menu. I don't know. It was interesting. It was exhilarating to find that out, but I don't have a Windows, so it's not like I could have learned it. So it was interesting. I sent a thank you letter in today, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, I'm wondering, because I think a robot game would be a lot easier to model everything. It would be better for mobile, and I could probably somehow make all the parts work. I think it would be a faster game to... Have you ever played Metabots? More of a Mac user. I even brought my MacBook Pro in. I showed them it. I said, oh, this isn't a Mac. And the proficiency test part of the interview, she said, oh, that's usually the first question that I ask. And I was like, yeah, I don't use Windows. So it was interesting. But what really concerned me was like halfway through, she seemed really surprised, and then she like rushed out and I guess went to talk to the first person that I interviewed with, because there was a phone call and I heard it inside of her office. So it was like, oh no, this can't be good. I'm assuming she was going to talk about me. So I don't know. If it went well, I don't know. It didn't seem like it went well, but it was an interesting experience. It was my first interview first interview at all in graphic design, so that's cool. But I mean, it was also for 3D modeling. I didn't even get a chance to show them that. So I don't know. I sent a thank you letter, and we'll see if they get back to me. That is all that I can say. I do want to start working on... Okay, let me go back to this. What did I said, have you played Metabots? Metabots. M-E-D-A. So, picture. Here's a picture. It's a pretty small picture. Is there a larger one? It's a little bit larger. Oops. Definitely. Nope, that's not larger. Do I have you friended on... I just found out about the whole friend thing here. Oh, I wasn't following you. How do I do the whole friend thing? I'm following you now, though. Man, I just want to be your friend. Recommended friends. What is that? New to streaming. Oh, cool. Whatever. Now they're just requesting random people for me. Here we go. Add as friend. There's 2 of you. There's one with 69 at the end. Okay, so yeah, apparently there's friends on Twitch now. That was like, I guess it happened a month ago or something. I don't know. It was recent. New. I don't even know like how to like know friends are online. Well, how do I search my own friends? Like, how do I know if there's any? I don't know how this friend crap works. Why do I have recommended channels? Yeah, it's... I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I want a larger picture. That's better. Alright, so this is a really poor quality version of it. Jesus. Come on. This looks better. Alright, Metabots. There's 2 robots here. However, what I like about it is you can take like the left arm off, the right arm off, the head off, and the legs off. And I like that whole idea that you can swap out parts. I have no clue how I'm gonna do it. Basically, the parts won't be able to move, I guess. I don't know. I guess they're gonna have to be like static parts. I'm gonna have, I think there's gonna have to be some programming involved. Let me see. 3D model attach parts. Okay, well anyway, like they'll have different attacks depending on like what their arm is, different speed, different power. But the 5 parts, right? 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, okay, the head, the legs, the bottom, the middle. That's 3, and then the 2 arms, 5. They can all be switched out, or would be switched out. It's gonna be maybe like Metabots. I don't know how Metabots was played. I forgot. I don't remember what their game core is, which is great because I'm not trying to copy them that much. So what I don't remember makes it better. How am I going to get the models to stick together? That's the problem. Oh, there was also a toy version. What would I call it? I have no clue. But I think like just developing pieces, or not pieces, but like whole characters and then splitting them into pieces. Like this would be split, this would be split, this would be split, this would be split. Would be sort of easy. I would just have to figure out what kind of characters I want. I definitely want a samurai, because samurais are awesome. Maybe somebody that shoots out like missiles, and I'd have to figure it out. But yeah, something kind of like that, little robot characters. Hey, I have two of these guys. Oh yeah, I have these two. I don't know exactly how I would, like how many characters I would create. But I'd have to make it so that you can upgrade them. Seems like a good idea. Yeah, and since they won't have that much movement, it would be faster to rig. Extremely faster. If they would need to be rigged, I don't know, because I would have to rotate it. The only way that I can see me attaching an object to another object is putting like an empty somewhere and attaching something onto the empty and then rotating the empty by a certain amount of degrees, which would rotate the object. And I don't even know if that's possible. I'm sure it somehow is. Yeah. Well, I mean, if they can be detailed without no, I guess I would have to have some textures. I would have to come up with some robot concepts. I wonder how many Metabots they've had. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 122. Whoa. That's not too bad. I think they have 122, I'm not sure. Let's visit page. Yeah, I think it was 122. And I can do them also based on animals and whatnot. So that's cool. You know what? Hey, Punke, I will be on in about an hour after I eat dinner. I have to go mow the lawn first. I'm actually going to start on that. I'm gonna make a ninja samurai bot type thing. And that should be pretty interesting. I think I'm gonna make them all like 4 feet tall, pretty much like this. After I send... Oh, I'm sorry. I have to mow the lawn right now at 6 p.m. and I can't do it if it gets too dark. But I will be back on tomorrow as well. But yeah, I'm pretty much just happy that I even got the interview. Since after 2 years of graduating, that's my first interview. So that was relieving. But it didn't go well. At least not the second half, which I think is the crucial half. But hey, I will see you later. I'll see you later tomorrow, man. You have a good sleep, nap. Are you napping or? Oh, sleep. Okay. So it's like 1-ish, right? 1 or 2? I don't know. Anyway, have a good one, man. I'll see you later. I'll let you know how it goes.